all life, human, non-human, and ecological, nothing exists alone. Human care and ecological care are interconnected. Care crises and ecological crises are interconnected. Indeed, ecological crises are care crises, and ecological issues are care issues. When wildfires rage, as they did last summer around the world and here in Canada, children can't breathe, asthma levels rise, homes are lost, people are displaced, anxiety levels peak, women's pregnancies are affected, and more young people proclaim that they will not bring children onto a damaged earth. That's not just an ecological crisis, it's a care crisis. In 2020, the World Health Organization declared that no country in the world offers a child both a chance of a healthy upbringing and an environment fit for their future. I'm a care scholar. For 30 years, I've consulted with governments and international organizations, and I've told stories about how women and men care for children and aging parents, how we need better care policies, and how to respond to growing care crises. With each passing year, I'm more and more convinced that to respond to care crises, we need to think differently about what care is. We need more imagination and pragmatism. We need to look for solutions and pathways in unlikely places. So I've been asking myself, what can I, a care thinker, learn from ecological thinkers? But each time I ask myself this question, I pause. I'm not an ecologist. I don't study trees or oceans or bugs. I'm a social scientist. I study people and their social worlds. And so what do? I do what I always do when I'm stuck. I go home, and I walk along the Atlantic Ocean. This is the Baie des Chaleurs in the province of New Brunswick here in Canada. It's where I was born and raised. It's where my 92-year-old mother still lives, where my 3 children have spent all their summers, where I meet up with my sisters every year. This is a photo from a walk with my mom and my sister Lise. This speech is also where, in my early 20s, I read 2 of Rachel Carson's books, The Sea Around Us and The Edge of the Sea. They were both published in the 1950s. And so when I asked myself, what can I learn from ecological thinkers, I returned to Rachel Carson. How many of you in this room have heard of Rachel Carson? Okay, good. Maybe a quarter? All right. 3 international research centers are named after Rachel Carson. Her life and work are the subject of 5 documentary films, including one that won an Academy Award for her book, The Sea Around Us. There's at least 15 biographies. One biographer writes that if you're under the age of 60, which I think includes most people in this room, it's likely you haven't heard of her. So don't feel too bad about that. Today, I want to share with you some of the lessons that I've learned about care from Rachel Carson and why I believe she still matters more than ever. Rachel Carson was born in 1907 in Springdale, Pennsylvania. At college, she studies biology and she earns a master's degree in zoology in 1932. This is a photo of Rachel when she was 26 years old in 1932. She starts a PhD, but she never completes it. Like many women of her generation, she takes on family responsibilities. For Carson, the death of her father and her sister and her mother's ill health means that through her 30s and 40s, Carson is both the family breadwinner and caregiver to her mom and 2 young nieces. For 15 years, Rachel Carson is a science writer for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. During that time, she also writes her first 2 books about the world's oceans. Her second book, The Sea Around Us, puts her on the literary map. It's on the New York Times bestseller list for more than a year. It wins the American National Book Award. There are lots of ocean books, but in the 1950s, Rachel Carson reaches a wide audience of scientists and citizens. Why? Because she combines science and storytelling. And she clearly conveys the interconnections between human and ocean worlds. The royalties from the sea around us give Carson the financial freedom to leave her government job, and she buys a cottage in the state of Maine by the Atlantic Ocean. There she writes full-time, until 1957, when her niece dies. Carson, now 50 years old, adopts her 5-year-old grandnephew, Roger. Carson's experiences of caring for humans are important to her story of caring for ecological worlds. As historian Jill Lepore writes, caring for other people brings its own knowledge. Carson came to see the world as beautiful and vulnerable, each part attached to every other part, not only through her scientific research, but also through a lifetime of caring for the very old and the very young. So while caring for her nephew and her mother, Carson begins to write a very different kind of nature book. In letters to her friends, she calls it the poison book. It's about a synthetic compound called DDT. DDT is described as the most powerful pesticide the world has ever known. It's developed in 1939 and used during World War II to eradicate insect-borne diseases like malaria. In the 1940s, it's used to control insects in cities, on farms, and on beaches. What you're looking at here is Long Island Beach, New York in 1945. For decades, DDT is seen as magic, miraculous. Its creator, Swiss chemist Paul Mueller, is even awarded a Nobel Prize. In the late 1940s, DDT is approved for household use, even for spraying on children. And this is an ad for DDT from the 1940s. Through the 1950s and 60s across the world, tons and tons and tons of DDT is dumped on forests and farms to kill the insects that threaten the pulp and paper and agricultural industries. Only a few studies are conducted to assess the effects of these mass sprayings. Those that are express grave concern. Citizens and scientists alike begin to see dead animals in their backyards and in local parks. Robins, squirrels, dogs, and cats, all poisoned by pesticides. Rachel Carson is observing all of this and conducting research on the effects of DDT spraying. She's alarmed and appalled by her findings. Over a period of 4 years in her seaside cottage, she writes her book, Silent Spring. Silent Spring is published in 1962. The book quickly sells 2 million copies. Its message is blunt and shocking. Carson argues that the unrestrained and unregulated use of chemical pesticides, especially DDT, alter human and ecological life for decades. She connects DDT to illness, to cancer, and to death. Silent Spring is both praised and condemned. On July 22, 1962, the front page of the New York Times reads, "Silent Spring is now noisy summer. Pesticide industries up in arms over a new book." This is how the article starts. The $300 million pesticides industry has been highly irritated by a quiet woman author whose previous works on science have been praised for the beauty and precision of their writing. Carson is publicly attacked as a scientist, as a woman scientist, as a woman. She's not only described as a quiet woman, but as hysterical, emotional. She's a communist, part of a lunatic fringe. And of course, the FBI investigates Carson. But Silent Spring also receives extensive praise from scientists and citizens. The book appears in another section of the New York Times, this time the book review. And here is one line from that review. "It's high time for people to know about these rapid changes in their environment and to take an effective part in the battle that may shape the future of all life on Earth." Now, this was over 60 years ago. Even Paul Mueller, the Nobel Prize-winning inventor of DDT, applauds Carson's work. The book makes its way to the White House. President John F. Kennedy mentions Silent Spring and Miss Carson in a press conference, and he sets up a presidential committee to review pesticide use. In 1963, Carson testifies to a congressional panel on pesticides. It's a very public event, but she's hiding a very private experience. She's dying of breast cancer. To cover her baldness from chemotherapy, she wears a dark brown wig. She dies 10 months later, 60 years ago, in 1964. She was 56 years old. Silent Spring is credited with launching the environmental movement in North America, and it played a role in creating major environmental legislation in the United States. So you're probably still wondering, why did I choose Rachel Carson as my ecological guide to help me rethink care? At first, I thought it was Carson's books on the sea that brought me to her. Or was it one of my mentors, Lorraine Code, an ecological feminist philosopher? But there was more. The more I immersed myself in Carson's world, long-buried memories emerged. And like all memories, they're not linear. It's 1973. I'm 13 years old. I'm doing a school project on the environment. At the Nipisquit Library, the librarian tells me, "You should read Silent Spring." I ask her why. She says, because Miramichi and the Miramichi River are in chapter 9. It's called Rivers of Death. Miramichi? That's the town down the road. My school basketball team often travels there. We love driving on the big bridge over the Miramichi River in a yellow school bus. In Silent Spring, I read about connections between DDT spraying and salmon showing up dead in the Miramichi River. It's 1968. I'm 8 years old. My father works 12-hour shifts at this pulp and paper mill. At the dinner table, he talks about DDT spraying to get rid of the spruce budworm in our local balsam forest. My father believes that DDT will save the paper mill. My mother, farm-raised, is worried about the effects of DDT on our food. Rachel Carson is never mentioned at my dinner table, but many years later, I realized that she was there. After my father passed away, I find a manila folder of papers in his desk. It contains a copy of a 1968 report from the New Brunswick Pulp and Paper Association. There are several pages devoted to Silent Spring and Chapter 9, Rivers of Death. The report is conclusive. Rachel Carson is wrong about DDT. Between 1952 and 1968, 85,000 metric tons of DDT are dumped on New Brunswick forests and farms. DDT was banned in 1972, but half a century later, there is scientific evidence that DDT is still present in lakes and rivers, including some in New Brunswick, in the soil, in our food, and in humans. A recent study from the University of California reveals the first human evidence that DDT's health threats span 3 generations. According to the study, young women whose grandmothers were exposed to DDT in the 1950s and 1960s may face increased risks of breast cancer and diabetes. This study hits home for me, literally. This is a photo of my 3 daughters walking on the beach with me and their grandmother. My daughters are now young women. Their grandmother was exposed to DDT in the 1950s and 60s. Ecological issues are care issues. So what lessons have I learned about care and ecological care from Rachel Carson? Lesson 1 is nothing exists alone in the intricate web of life. And here I take you back to Chapter 9, Rivers of Death, and to this passage, which is the metaphoric beating heart of ecological thinking. We poison the caddisflies in a stream, and the salmon runs dwindle and die. We poison the gnats in a lake, and the poison travels from link to link of the food chain, and soon the birds of the lake margins become its victims. We spray our elms, and the following springs are silent of robin song, not because we sprayed the robins directly, but because the poison traveled step by step through the now familiar elm leaf earthworm robin cycle. In this unseen world, minute causes produce mighty effects. The idea that all life is interconnected and nothing exists alone is not unique. It has long been present in other philosophical and thought traditions, including in Indigenous ways of knowing and being. And I'm grateful to my First Nations collaborators, Eva Jewell and Vanessa Watts, for teaching me about this. And so if Rachel Carson were alive today, what would she say? Listen to Indigenous thinkers and elders. Listen to ecological thinkers. Stop separating human and ecological care. The second lesson is that science is situated in socioeconomic and political webs. Science does not exist in ivory towers. It's infused with norms and values. It's not immune to economic and political pressures. Rachel Carson knew this. Hers was a classic David and Goliath story. In 1962, Goliath was a $300 million pesticides industry. Today, in 2024, ecological scientists face a much larger Goliath. Take the global fossil fuel market. It's now estimated at almost $12 trillion. So how can good science about ecological care and about human care, childcare, elder care, health care, how can it be heard above the roar of massive economic and political forces? And so what would Rachel Carson say? Scientists have responsibilities, moral responsibilities, not to profit, but to people and the planet. The third lesson is about the power of stories. Carson was not only a meticulous researcher, she was a master storyteller. In the words of Margaret Atwood, one of Canada's most respected writers, Rachel Carson knew how to explain science to ordinary readers in a way that they could understand. She knew that if you don't love a thing, you won't save it. Her love for the natural world shines through everything she wrote. And so what would Rachel Carson say about storytelling? Save what you love, don't stay silent. Weave science and storytelling. Write and tell stories that touch the mind and the heart. Stories that inspire collective action for the present and the future care of humans, non-humans, and the planet. Today I've shared with you just a little bit about Rachel Carson's writing, about her story, and my ongoing ecological journey with her, and also 3 of the many lessons that I've learned from her. Interconnections between care crisis and ecological crises are growing every day. UNICEF tells us that right now, for the first time ever, a global generation of children is growing up in a dangerous and uncertain world because of climate change. 1 billion children are at extremely high risk of the impacts of the climate crisis. And so I'm asking myself, what would Rachel Carson do? And I'm also asking, what will we do? Thank you very much.